Greetings. I'm Evan Swenson. I'm an author and a book publisher. I'm also the developer and member of Author Masterminds. Today, we're visiting with James Qeqe from South Africa. James, welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swenson. Highly appreciated, and it's nice to be here.
Yeah. You said Mr. Swenson, and I have a friend that when I say to him, Mr., he's older than I am, he said, no, that's not me. That was my father was Mr. So that you are a charter member of Author Masterminds. So you've been here with Author Masterminds from the beginning. Author Masterminds, of course, is the sponsor of Readers and Writers Book Club, for which this interview is taking place in their behalf, so that readers and writers of the book club can know more about you, James. James, you have written a couple of books. This is your first book, James. Tell us about the unknown of the known in Africa.
Well, thanks. It's a book which was inspired by xenophobic attacks in South Africa, which is my country. It was actually to address the issue of the unknown part of Africa. There are stories recorded in our history, but most of the times they are misinterpreted and they are misread and they are mispronounced at the same time. So I felt like I needed to write this book to address that issue, that we can't have xenophobic attacks, African against another African. So the book is about the unknown of the known in Africa, where we come together as Africans to understand each other. Like, for instance, in the beginning, it addresses that xenophobia was not supposed to be even a term that is referred to an African conflict or fight. It's something, because xenophobia it derives from a Greek word, xenophobia, which means a stranger or a foreigner, and then phobia would be a fear. So it's basically a fear of a stranger or a fear of a foreigner.
Well, now,
so
James,
we can't.
Go ahead. I cut you off there. I had a question and I wanted to ask it.
Okay, so we can't have strangers who are also Africans. So we need to understand our history. We need to understand where we come from.
But this isn't a historical book. This is a novel.
It's a historical novel.
Oh, it's based on history.
Yes,
it wasn't created in your mind.
Actually the characters are created in mind, but the story is actually historical. It's an event which can be found in research.
So these events in your book actually happened in Africa, not just South Africa, but Africa.
Yes, to be more precise, in Southern Africa.
Okay, so this is your second book, James, and there's a difference in this cover in the text on it than in the other one, and that's a question that I want to ask you in just a moment. But first, here's a book about South Africa with the cliffs of Dakotas on it, with the presidents of the United States. Now, how did that get in Africa?
You know, the United States of America and South Africa, to be more precise, they have a lot in common when you look at the history. It's just that even when you go to our schools, when you read the history of the USA and of SA, you find a lot more similarities than differences. And I mean it, very, very much similar. It might differ in times and in the occurrence of the events. But if you are a true historian, you would figure out that there are a lot more similarities than differences.
There's one other thing that on this cover that is different, James, and it's what we call your tagline, the new voice of Africa. That wasn't on your first book. Why wasn't it on your first book? How did it get here, and what does that mean?
Well, the first book was actually an introduction of my work and my research. So after a couple of people have read the first book, they have actually, gave me that kind of a vibe that this could be the new voice which we never heard before, because history is always new. Every time history is being told and being written, it sounds new because the words are new and the attitude is new. So the new voice of Africa comes up in the second book after you also named me the new voice of Africa. So that is the idea behind. The first book was introducing this voice, and the second book is actually affirming that this is the new voice of Africa.
Okay, so you said you named me that.
Yeah.
So when I saw your works, James, and we met you, and that it seemed to me that this was a new voice of Africa. Now, we put that then on the second book, and you like that. Now, we're going to talk about an organization that you started that's called the New Voice of Africa, I believe. Now, did the New Voice of Africa name, did that come before you started the organization, or did it come after the name?
After I was named the New Voice of Africa, then the organization was born in the New Voice of Africa already. So what came first? It's me as the New Voice of Africa, and then followed by the organization.
Well, who is James anyway? Let's just. You live in South Africa. It's a long ways from Anchorage, Alaska. I know that. So let's meet you. Who are you? Let's talk about these people here. Who are these people?
These are the New Voice of Africa, including me there. So, so basically, that's my father, as everyone can see that. And those are my siblings. Those are my fellow inmates, my brother and sisters. So Emmanuel Mabelani is my editor. He edited the second book, which brings the New Voice of Africa out. So he is part of the New Voice of Africa. So these are the New Voice of Africa. This is my family, basically.
So, James, you don't live at home anymore. You live elsewhere. So what are you now engaged in besides writing books?
I am engaged in priesthood, the Catholic priesthood. I am a student priest in good terms. It's known as a seminarian. So I am a seminarian for the Catholic Church. I don't basically live away from home. I time and again go to see my family and relatives. where they are. So I basically go home and visit them.
Now you're engaged in a 7-year program, and you're about 5 years into that program. Or it's actually a 9-year program, is it?
Yeah.
But you're in
total.
And you're in about 5 years.
Yes.
I admire you for doing that.
Thank you very much.
That's a lot of work. This is the New Voice of Africa. The organization came following your books. The books was out, and then this organization started. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So this is the New Voice of Africa. This is the organization that you started. Was that because of that your books defined who and what you were there and your mission? Or did you have that already in mind when you was writing the books?
Part of it was inspired of what is addressed by the books, but also at the same time, it's an idea which was in my mind for a very long time, but I guess I didn't have a strategy to just come out with it. So the books were actually the drive to the organization, because the organization is basically addressing what the books are talking about: the racial struggles, the xenophobia, and the gender-based violence, the economy that is not growing in Africa, the undeveloped countries in Africa, which should have been by now well developed already. So the organization, correct, it comes after the books have already this title, The New Voice of Africa.
So the books, are they kind of a manual for the organization, or are they history, or are they novels that people would read and say, I just read a really good novel?
Actually, they are manual because the books themselves, they speak about the organization, what it is about. The books talk about all these struggles which I have listed and named a moment ago. So it's not just a novel where you would say, yeah, I read a novel, so what? But the books are telling the story, are telling the Africa that we want, the kind of Africa that we want. It's not possible to bring this Africa unless we come to dialogue, because it may happen that the Africa that I want is not the Africa that someone else wants. So if we come together and converse about it, we would understand what kind of Africa we all want.
So if I lived in South Africa, James, and I saw your books and I read them and I got interested in your organization, you and I would sit down and have a conversation. What would we talk about that you would tell me the purpose of this organization is and why we want you to be a member of it?
Yeah.
This is why. So what would you tell me?
Well, basically, first and foremost, I would be the doctor, you would be a patient. So you would first tell me what you are sick of, what makes you sick, or what are your symptoms, and so on. So and then I would draw you closer to my surgery lab. So I'm basically saying to you that this is the organization that wants us all to live in harmony and in peace. So if you are that person who wants to live in harmony and peace, we would sit down and discuss about what kind of Africa we want. Part of it would be to address the issues of corruption, which are holding back Africa from growth. So we would talk about such things, and how would you be an assistant of that, and how will I engage with you as the member of the organization, and the role that you can play. So we would talk about basically about those kind of things. What do you think about xenophobia? What do you think about racism? What do you think about inequality, and so on?
So you're telling me that my membership in your organization would be one that I would be active. It would not be passive. Now, so for example, my fantasy about Africa that I would want would be, I would like to go hunting in Africa, and I'd like to be there 100 years ago when there was not a lot of people and everything was just ideal, like the big game hunters. That's not your organization.
No. You see, we discussed the current issues. Well, we can't go back anymore. We are developing. The world is evolving. So we need to adapt ourselves to the present time. We need to live with the present time. Many people, especially at your age even, would say that I wish that we can go back. I wish that my parents were still alive. I wish that I was still young again. But unfortunately, we can't do that because basically they would say that times were better off then than now. But we must face the reality. We can't go back. We are the new generation which needs a different Africa. We find ourselves in this situation, so we should live in it, and we should do something about that. We must develop our own Africa rather than going back, because we can't. So the Africa I would want is the Africa which is free from corruption, free in equality, an Africa that is not experiencing racism, an Africa that people are employed, Africa that is free from poverty, Africa that is educated, and so on. So that's the kind of Africa I would want, because when you look at the times, the present time, and the signs of the time, they are telling us that education is needed to develop the economy, to get employed, to develop the economy of the country, the economy of Africa at large. So we should adapt to the present time, but evolve in it and develop the Africa of tomorrow. So
your organization, I understand that you like this symbol, James. Tell us about this symbol in Africa. What does this mean? It is a symbol. It's symbolic of something. What is it, James?
Well, first and foremost, it's a symbol. It's one of my favorite symbols. It's a symbol of liberation. You know, in the olden days in Africa, in South Africa also, during the apartheid era, where the government was oppressing the natives, South African black majority. So this would be the symbol during those years and days. This would be the symbol that it will be the symbol to show that we are not liberated and we demand liberation.
So in your books, do you speak of this liberation? Is that part of your text when I get through reading your books? Is that what's going to come out?
More especially the second book, the brightness of darkness of an African, because it talks about the racism in South Africa. At the same time, it talks about racism in the US. So I linked the two stories or history of the two countries to put more similarities rather than differences. So yes, this is what you would find in the books, especially the second one, towards the explanation of terms in liberation movements that were held in America and in South Africa. Yeah.
So you said that this was a textbook. So if a reader picked that up, would that assist and to help them understand and to know and maybe become a part of your organization as far as liberating?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
not necessarily liberating, but from government, but liberating from poverty, for races. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. We are together.
So in America and in Africa, there are some realities. This is a picture of one of those realities.
Yeah.
So tell us, how does something like this reality picture fit in with your organization and your books?
If you notice that on the photo there's also that liberation symbol which we just talked about a moment ago. So we still, even today, cry out for liberation. We it might be a different liberation, but it is still needed that we liberated. I mean, the reality that we're talking about now is, if I would state the facts, is that my organization wants to heal the wounds of apartheid, of racism, of xenophobia. So if we continue in our present moment to raise up our fists again as to symbolize that we are not liberated, then that means there is a problem with our society. There's a problem with the people we produce in our own society, because that reminded me of history. If you read old history books, textbooks, it's very, very rare that you won't see those kinds of symbols, people raising up their fists. It's because they were not liberated. It's because they were crying out for something. So if we today still do that, that means there's something wrong with our society and we need to address it. So the organization addresses the matter that we need to be liberated. So the reality is that the history repeats itself, and it shouldn't be. History repeats itself, so we need to liberate ourselves from this bondage.
So I think earlier when we were talking to James, I think you said that this is something that has impressed you, that this is a way to liberate all of us so that we can eliminate the poverty and we can eliminate racism and the other ills. So how did this affect your life, and why did we get this picture?
First, this speaks volumes. This speaks everything, On top of that trunk, if you have noticed, there are a lot of books there. We must, this is my opinion, I think if we think before we speak, we wouldn't come to conclusion which are, maybe I would say conclusions that are wrong or basically negative, but we would understand the circumstances of whatever situation we find ourselves in. And also we need to read before we think. You can't think about something you never heard of, or something that you have no idea of. So you need to read. You need to read and then think after that. But even if you correct something, but you would have read something and then you thought about it and you correct it because you have read about it. But if you just think without writing, you won't go far. You won't go far.
So let's talk about your writing for just a moment. You started someplace, and I think you told me one time we was visiting James that this picture right here was an inspiration to you. Talk to me about that.
So this is James in many years ago, I would say, even when I was still at school, expected to do my schoolwork, but this is basically what I would do. In front of a computer, in front of my textbooks and so on, instead of reading or doing my schoolwork, I would just grab a piece of paper and a pen to write something, because I would have entertained some thoughts and some words in my mind. So this is what I would literally do, to leave everything and then just entertain those thoughts and those words which I've been playing within my mind. So that's why even in my private space, you find a lot of rough papers which have a lot of ink on them, writings that you would not understand, but myself only. But when I collect everything, it makes sense. It makes something profound. It makes, even if it's a paragraph or a page, whatever, but it's a story to be remembered. Always, every time I read it, it's new. It sounds new. So this is what I would do when I wanted to write.
So let's go back to when you were that little boy. When was it that you wrote the first sentence or paragraph for your first book that's now in the book? When did that happen?
That happened in 2014, when it was actually history period in our school. So time and again, I would visit the school to engage in history. So that was in June 2014 when I first wrote the first words of the unknown of the known in Africa, and they read as follows. Many years ago, while I was still a student, my lecture started sending me to Russia, where I would learn history. Those were the very first words of my book.
So that's 6 years ago?
Yeah,
So
basically.
do you look back on that? I guess you'd say that's pretty primitive writing, or how do you look at that, James?
Actually, I don't even read the printed copy that you published. I read the original copy, which is handwritten, and every time I read it, I just laugh, and I would say this is actually what I wanted to give to the people to read about.
So there's a difference between your manuscript and the book?
Partially, yes. Partially, there is difference, but a lot of work in my original manuscript is I would say 90% of it is in the book, in the final copy. 90% of it. 10% would be, taken away probably by you or someone else. I'm joking. It's me who took everything out. I'm joking.
So I guess, James, when you pick up the manuscript or you pick up the book and you're looking at them together, what kind of emotion do you have when you see, here's my manuscript and here's the book that came from that manuscript? You know,
it's a dream come
as a writer,
true.
how do you feel about that?
It's a dream come true. You know, it's a dream come true, and I think I should take a photo of it and send it to you. It's very emotional because when I started to write that, I never thought that, although I had an idea in my mind that I want to publish this one day, but I never thought it would happen this soon. I thought maybe it would take maybe another 20 years or even more than that, but it actually happened sooner than I ever thought. So it got me emotional, of course, but every time I look at it, it's a transformation. That's the word I always think about, transformation from that manuscript to that beautiful copy of my first book. So it's really incredible. That's why I cannot separate the two at all, because it also teaches me that in life you may people may look at you as nothing, just like that old manuscript, handwritten. But when it was published, everybody wants to gaze their eyes and touch the copy. So it's transformation in ourselves, that out there are people who look at you and say, it won't go far. It will just, fall and never rise again. But that's transformation. You have to believe in yourself. It's possible for everyone.
James, I suspect that when your organization has been successful and we have come together better on those issues that you're trying to resolve, of poverty and racism and those things, someone's going to find that manuscript someplace, and they're going to look at the stuff that was left out, and they're going to quote it, and they're maybe after you're gone, and they're so
I'm sure. Yeah.
I know you have strong feelings about that. I can tell when you're talking. Also, know that you have strong feelings about Africa.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your strong feelings about your Mother Africa, as it were.
Yeah, the woman I fell for. This was my first crush. This is the woman I would time and again marry. So this is Mother Africa. If you are proudly African, you can't take off your eyes from it. You gaze on it and you learn everything. You learn every time and everything about Africa once you gaze your eyes on Mother Africa. We have 54 countries in Africa and different languages, different people, different cultures, but we are one. We are Africans. So basically, the New Voice of Africa organization is aiming to be heard. This new voice to be heard by all Africans, and then by everybody worldwide. So this is my Africa. This is our Africa. This is our Mother Africa. So we should love Mother Africa because it's part of us. It's part of who we are.
James,
I am black. I am black even because I'm lucky. That's how I describe myself.
Now say that again.
I don't know if I'm saying I am black because I am lucky. I don't know if you understand that.
I don't. Explain it.
It makes actually it's the love of Africa. It's how we express ourselves in Africa. That I am black because I'm lucky. That's the way to show how much you love Africa.
I like that. What are we looking forward to coming from you in the future? Are you writing another book now?
Yes, I am busy with another book, the third book, which I hope to publish it before August this year. The manuscript is done. It's only the editorial that is happening at the moment. But rest assured, by October, November this year, the book will be out already. Because every year I should release a book. 2018, The Unknown of the Known in Africa. 2019, The Brightness of an African. And 2020, I won't say the title of the book until the book comes out.
James, thank you. This has been a delightful time with you, James. I have really enjoyed this and getting to know you and a little bit about your family, your background, anything that you would like to say. And as we wind up and say goodbye, is there any closing remarks that you would like to offer to your readers, other writers, the people that your group would be interested in, your organization?
For sure, yeah. This is a cry to everyone out there, black or white, colored or Indian or whatever. We are all people. Support the Author Masterminds authors, sponsored by Evan Swenson, our publisher. You can get any book that you would like to read, any genre. Those authors, they are really brilliant and they are really kings and queens in their genres. Come and join our Readers and Writers Book Club and our Facebook. It's there on Twitter, it's there on Instagram. Support us, read, choose your genre, and every genre is relevant because emotions and feelings changes every time. The organization, the New Voice of Africa, which I am currently its president at the moment, is out there. It's crying out for your help to assist us to voice out this new voice, so that we can live in a better world, in a better environment and society.
James, thank you very much. We'll have another interview from you when that other book comes out, yet unnamed. But in the meantime, just keep in touch.
Sure.